Throughout human history, whenever a sudden, invisible disease sweeps through a population, the immediate instinct is to look at the sky. We see mass illness, and we assume we are witnessing the end of the world. You can trace this panic directly back to the massive outbreaks of bubonic plague. Entire societies were decimated, and the trauma created terrifying visual symbols, like the famous beak-like masks worn by plague doctors in the 17th century. This historical pattern continued into the 1918 influenza pandemic. Physical defense mechanisms, like mandatory cloth masks worn by citizens on the street, became the focal point for intense societal anxiety and disruption. In the modern era, biological fear translates almost instantly into social breakdown. Supply chains freeze and scarcity sets in, leaving a terrified public to scramble for whatever control they can find in an empty grocery aisle. Within religious communities, this biological fear often mutates into a specific kind of prophetic sensationalism. There is a rush to collapse ordinary disease outbreaks into final apocalyptic events, labeling modern pandemics as the biblical 7 last plagues. That misinterpretation creates two deeply destructive extremes. On one side, anti-medical fanaticism leads to a complete rejection of basic scientific reality. On the other, technocratic idolatry causes a fearful public to surrender their moral authority to state institutions promising total security. Societal panic over a pathogen provides the perfect environment for control and coercion. The way human beings use a crisis to manipulate and blame others is far more dangerous than the biological agent itself. In the Old Testament, pestilence appears within a wider pattern of war, famine, and social disorder. The biblical text presents disease as a physical symptom of a community coming unraveled, a severe warning, rather than the final destruction of the earth. This epidemiologic triangle explains how disease operates in a fragile world. You have an infectious agent, a susceptible host, and the environmental conditions that allow them to meet. Epidemics have physical mechanics, spreading through poor sanitation, crowded housing, and weakened immune systems. Because disease relies on physical mechanics, interrupting those mechanics is a legitimate act of mercy. Smallpox was eradicated through coordinated vaccination and surveillance, concrete evidence of how preventive medicine restrains suffering in a fallen world. Corrupted medical data, however, poses a profound danger to public health. In 1998, Andrew Wakefield published a fraudulent study linking vaccines to autism. Subsequent investigations revealed manipulated data, ethical violations, and undisclosed financial conflicts. Wakefield's fraud manufactured decades of deadly vaccine skepticism. Religious skepticism that ignores medical reality results in a dangerous deception, leaving the most vulnerable members of a community exposed to preventable harm. During the Black Death of the 14th century, the massive demographic shock generated profound religious anxiety. Unable to stop the plague biologically, frightened populations looked for a moral explanation for their suffering. This desperation led to the violent scapegoating of minority groups. Jewish communities across Europe were falsely accused of poisoning wells to cause the disease, resulting in widespread massacres as the public searched for someone to blame for God's perceived anger. This historical pattern of warning and human cruelty is entirely distinct from the actual 7 last plagues described in Revelation chapter 16. In biblical eschatology, a strict boundary exists, known as the close of probation. The final, unmixed wrath of God falls only after human character is permanently settled and Christ's mediatorial work in the heavenly sanctuary ceases. We currently live in an era where repentance is possible and medical mercy can relieve suffering. Since the door of mercy remains open, any historical pandemic is a warning of fragility, not the final bowl of wrath. The scapegoating scene during the Black Death provides a template for the final prophetic crisis described in Revelation chapters 13 and 14. Panic-driven societies instinctively demand a return to religious favor when calamities strike. This search for divine favor leads to the true prophetic issue, coerced worship. Prophetic tradition suggests that when natural disasters and pestilence spiral out of control, Sabbath keepers will be blamed for the chaos. This creates the political momentum to mandate Sunday observance as a way to restore national morality. Crying mark of the beast over ordinary public health measures like mask mandates distracts from this specific threat. The real prophetic danger involves a religious political union that forcefully dictates worship and suppresses the commandments of God. Spiritually confused societies use the fragility exposed by a pandemic to demand a counterfeit moral order. They weaponize fear to dismantle liberty of conscience, trading freedom for a false sense of spiritual security. Our response to disease must involve both a defense of conscience and the active practice of rational medical compassion. We protect the vulnerable and provide truthful health education while refusing to surrender our allegiance to God. In the face of disease, humanity needs truthful witnesses who serve the suffering and point towards Christ. Prophetic seriousness is found in sober service and the defense of liberty, not in the exploitation of tragedy for theatrical alarmism.